Dan Orlovsky didn't waste a second before ripping into Shedeur Sanders. Just hours after Sanders' now viral mime moment hit the internet, Orlovsky hopped on TV and called it immature, unhelpful, and probably damaging to his NFL future. He practically rolled his eyes into the next dimension, pointing out that third-string quarterbacks, especially fifth-round picks, shouldn't be clowning around in public, let alone silently miming to the crowd like some street performer before the Vikings game. It looked tone-deaf, weird, and worst of all, arrogant. And the internet ran with it.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
But what Orlovsky didn't realize, what nobody realized at first, was that Shedeur wasn't just goofing around. He was sending a message. A very specific one. That mime? It wasn't about showboating or attention-seeking. It was a silent shot aimed squarely at Rex Ryan, who'd just gone off on Shedeur days earlier, accusing him of being immature, lacking work ethic, and not ready for the pros. It was a calculated clapback with no words, just a smirk, a locked jaw, and a pantomime of "I hear you, but I'm not playing your game." Suddenly, the hot take started to cool. Within 48 hours, the media tide shifted. What started as a dragging turned into a reassessment. Was this really immaturity, or was it something smarter? Something strategic? Because if you zoom out, Shedeur's playing chess. He knows he's buried on the depth chart, sitting behind starters while the clock ticks on his rookie season. Every time he steps onto that field, whether in pads or pre-game warm-ups, he's got to make noise. And if that means flipping a negative into a viral power move, he's going to do it. Shedeur isn't just surviving the NFL grind. He's branding himself through it. The mime wasn't random. It was a calculated moment of psychological warfare. A fifth-round pick with no guaranteed future found a way to hijack the narrative and turn a critic's jab into his own spotlight. And now, with the London game looming and all eyes locked in, the stakes are towering. If he plays, every move will be dissected. If he doesn't, the mime will echo louder than ever. Either way, Shedeur Sanders has already done something remarkable. He made himself impossible to ignore. You saw the clip. Shedeur Sanders, standing on the sidelines before the Vikings game, staring dead into the camera, lips sealed, hands raised in a classic mime routine. No words, no smirk, just full-on silent theater. And in seconds, NFL Twitter exploded like it always does. Half of it confused, the other half ready to drag him straight into meme oblivion. Leading the charge? Dan Orlovsky. The former NFL quarterback-turned-analyst wasted no time calling out Sanders' behavior as immature and damaging. He questioned how this silent stunt could possibly help Shedeur's NFL chances, especially when he's not even first string. A mime act? As a third-string quarterback? Orlovsky made it clear. He thought this wasn't just weird. He thought it was self-sabotage. But then, in true sports media fashion, the narrative did a full 180 within 48 hours. And Dan? He might want to start practicing his own mime routine because the internet suddenly had receipts and the story got a whole lot messier. Turns out, this wasn't just a random act of weirdness. Shedeur's silence had a very specific target, Rex Ryan. Let's rewind a little. Rex Ryan had recently taken aim at Shedeur, questioning his maturity, his work ethic, and basically suggesting he wasn't NFL ready. That kind of comment carries weight coming from someone like Ryan. And Shedeur heard it, loud and clear. So when he showed up before that Vikings game, silent, calculated, and miming like he was on a mission, that wasn't just trolling. It was a direct, wordless clapback. A performance art protest, delivered straight through the lens of every NFL camera nearby. A statement, not a meltdown. And suddenly, all that talk about immaturity? It started to sound a lot more like misunderstanding. The same analysts who criticized him for being unserious had to walk their takes back. Because now Shedeur wasn't just being weird. He was playing chess while everyone else thought he was stuck in TikTok prank mode. He wasn't clowning. He was communicating. What looked like a sideline stunt was actually a fully loaded response. A silent message to Rex Ryan and the rest of the talking heads who doubted his drive. It was a power move disguised as a joke, and depending on how you look at it, maybe even genius. Let's not forget, Shedeur Sanders isn't just another quarterback trying to get some camera time. He's a fifth-round pick, stuck in the shadows behind two other QBs, trying to stay relevant in one of the most brutal media ecosystems in sports. Every action is under a microscope. Every move can be twisted, clipped, debated. And yet here he is, flipping that microscope back on his critics, turning their commentary into content, turning their doubts into dialogue. The mime moment wasn't for laughs. It was for leverage. Because in today's NFL, being silent isn't the same as being passive. Sometimes silence screams. And for Shedeur, this wasn't just about clapping back at Rex Ryan. It was about sending a message to every scout, every GM, and every analyst who ever doubted whether he belonged in the league. You think I'm immature? Fine. I'll mime maturity so loudly, you'll be forced to talk about it on national TV. Now, let's not sugarcoat things. Being a third-string quarterback isn't glamorous. It's a constant uphill climb. You're always one injury away from your shot, and one mistake away from being forgotten. For someone like Shedeur, who already came into the league with a name, a spotlight, and a swarm of expectations, the pressure is different. It's not just about performance. It's about perception. So while Orlovsky and others initially read his silence as immaturity, what they missed was the strategy behind it. Because Shedeur isn't just trying to play football. He's trying to play the game behind the game. The branding game. The relevance game. The mental chess of surviving in the NFL long enough to get your shot. And this mime moment? It's exactly that. A calculated risk to shift the narrative, grab attention, and remind people that yes, he's still here. The irony is that Dan Orlovsky's criticism only amplified the move. Because in slamming Shedeur for hurting his image, Orlovsky unknowingly helped build it. His rant got clipped, reposted, dissected. And suddenly, people weren't just watching the mime video for laughs, they were watching it for meaning. And that meaning hit different once the Rex Ryan angle came out. That's when you start to realize this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment Gen Z trolling. It was a strategic play in a larger battle of narratives. A public chess move by a player who understands that in today's NFL, being talked about can be just as important as being on the field. Let's talk stakes. The upcoming game in London is no small matter. While Dylan Gabriel is expected to start for the Browns, all eyes will be on who's waiting in the wings. And Shedeur? He's been building this moment quietly, strategically. If he gets even a few snaps, every pass, every mistake, every sideline glance will be dissected in slow motion. That mime clip? It'll either look like the prelude to a breakout moment, or a viral blip on the way to irrelevance. But that's the risk he's clearly willing to take. Because Shedeur's approach isn't about playing it safe. It's about standing out. And in a league where cookie-cutter professionalism is the norm, standing out takes guts. It takes strategy. And sometimes it takes a moment so confusing and dramatic, people have to pay attention, even if it's a mime. What this whole saga exposes is how quick the media machine is to pounce on a narrative before all the pieces are in place. Orlovsky wasn't alone in his critique. He just happened to be the loudest. But his instant judgment is exactly why Shedeur's move hit so hard. Because in a world where every reaction is instant, Shedeur's silence forced people to slow down and look, to wonder, to ask, what is he doing? And by the time the real meaning surfaced, the narrative had already shifted, from cringe to calculated. That's power. And honestly, it's a masterclass in controlling your own story, especially for a player still waiting for his chance to actually play. That's what makes this whole thing so compelling. Shedeur didn't just defend himself. He didn't tweet a rebuttal. He didn't go on a podcast to clap back. He didn't even roll his eyes in a press conference. He let the internet argue about it for him. That's not just confidence, that's control. Now, is it risky? Of course. If Shedeur doesn't perform when it counts, the critics will come back harder than ever. The mime move will be replayed endlessly as a symbol of wasted potential. People will say he should have focused on the playbook instead of pulling stunts. That he had a moment and blew it. But if he does deliver, if he shows up and makes something happen, even once, that mime video becomes part of the legend. A moment of psychological warfare that flipped the narrative before he even took a snap. That's the high-wire act of modern NFL branding. And Shedeur's walking it with no net. This whole thing is bigger than just one viral clip. It's a case study in how young athletes are reshaping what it means to stay relevant. They're not just chasing stats, they're building brands. And sometimes, that means saying nothing louder than anyone else in the room. Dan Orlovsky learned that the hard way. So here's your takeaway. In the NFL, it's not just about what you do on the field. It's about how you frame the story around you. Shedeur Sanders turned a silent mime act into a headline, a debate, and a moment of power. Whether it works or backfires, that's up to the next game. But one thing's for sure, Shedeur Sanders isn't just trying to play quarterback. He's playing the long game. And he's already made himself impossible to ignore. So what do you think? Bold brilliance or career risk? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories where the NFL becomes a reality show, hit subscribe. Because in this league, the drama never takes a bye week. If Shedeur had just quietly warmed the bench, nodded through the pre-game rituals, and said nothing, we wouldn't even be talking about him. He'd be buried under the usual pile of third-string obscurity, waiting for the camera to maybe catch him once squinting into a clipboard. But now, he's front-page material. He's trending. He's in the conversation. That's not an accident. This is the NFL in 2025, where the line between athlete and entertainer is razor-thin. Where silence can hit harder than a tweet, and going viral off the field might be your only shot on the field. If you're a fifth-round pick with a famous last name, people already expect you to fade into nepotism-flavored mediocrity. So when Shedeur pulls a move that screams, "Oh, I know you're watching," you have to respect the hustle. And let's not forget, this isn't some guy trying to carve out a career from scratch. Shedeur Sanders has been under the microscope since before he stepped on a college field. His father is Deion Sanders. The man doesn't just cast a shadow, he creates a solar eclipse. Every decision Shedeur makes is going to be linked to his dad's legacy, for better or worse. So when people like Rex Ryan come out swinging, accusing him of being immature, of coasting on the Sanders name, of not putting in the grind, that hits differently. That's not just criticism. That's a challenge to everything Shedeur has tried to build for himself. It's a direct shot at his identity, his credibility, and his future. And that's what makes his silent response so powerful. He didn't flinch. He didn't retaliate with words. He didn't go on a social media rant or drop a cryptic story. He performed a message. A mime. A literal representation of what it looks like to say absolutely nothing while saying everything. It's psychological warfare dressed in shoulder pads. You could see it in his body language. The stillness. The eye contact with the camera. He knew what he was doing. This wasn't some pre-game goofball energy. This was art direction. This was a visual subtweet, staged with the precision of someone who understands media optics down to the pixel. And whether you think it was cringe or clever, that doesn't really matter. Because it worked. Dan Orlovsky may have been the loudest critic, but once the full context came out, you could almost hear the gears turning. The pivot was fast. The tone shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't "what's wrong with Shedeur?" It was, "Wait, is this kid a genius?" That's the danger of hot takes in a cold information world. People rush to assign meaning to moments they barely understand. And by the time the truth drops, the damage, or in this case, the spotlight, is already in place. And if we're being totally honest, Shedeur exposed a huge weakness in the system. The knee-jerk nature of sports commentary. Analysts jump on a moment, slap on a narrative, and run with it before verifying the why. Shedeur weaponized that impulse. He let them build a story without all the facts, knowing the reveal would flip the script. It's borderline diabolical, and it's undeniably effective. Now, that doesn't mean this strategy is without risk. You don't just get to mime your way through criticism and assume the league will cheer you on. Shedeur's silent act worked because it invited conversation. It made people curious. It made them dig. But now that the attention's here, he has to deliver. This upcoming game in London isn't just another checkbox on the schedule. It's a litmus test. It's a potential breakout moment, or a very public flop. And the pressure's sky high. Because Shedeur didn't just raise eyebrows. He raised expectations. All the silence, all the viral moments, all the debate, it's built a platform. But a platform doesn't mean anything if you can't back it up with play. That's the double-edged sword of modern sports branding. You can make yourself the main character. But the second you miss a cue, drop a pass, or blow a drive, everyone's ready to turn your movie into a blooper reel. And Shedeur knows this. He's not naive. If anything, this entire stunt shows how aware he is of the machine he's in. He didn't mime to be cute. He did it to seize control of a narrative that's been spinning around him for years. To show he's not just a storyline waiting to happen. He's the one writing it. But even the best writers need a third act. And this London game? It's where the story either turns into a triumph or a cautionary tale. That's what makes this saga so fascinating. We're watching a young athlete test the limits of reputation management in real time. He's taking risks, playing the long game, and daring the league to keep ignoring him. Not with stats, not with highlight reels, but with symbolism. You don't see that every day, especially from a player who isn't even starting. But that's where Shedeur stands out. He's not waiting for permission to be part of the conversation. He is the conversation. And whether that leads to a comeback arc or a cautionary fade out, that's still up in the air. One thing's clear. Shedeur understands something a lot of players don't. In a league dominated by storylines, the best way to stay relevant is to create them. And look, not everyone's going to be on board with that. The old school crowd will scoff. They'll say, just shut up and play. But that mindset doesn't hold water anymore. This isn't 1995. This is an era where players have to market themselves, where visibility is currency, and where sometimes silence isn't passive. It's a power move. So yeah, Shedeur Sanders mimed before an NFL game. Yeah, he got dragged. And yeah, the full context flipped the entire situation on its head. But now, as we wait to see what happens next, we're not talking about just another QB trying to make the roster. We're talking about someone who's redefined what it means to fight for your place in the league, without saying a single word. And that's kind of iconic. So here's the question. Was Shedeur's mime moment reckless? Or revolutionary? Was it a misstep in media etiquette or a calculated PR masterstroke? And most importantly, will it matter if he doesn't perform when it counts? That's what makes the stakes so real. Because at the end of the day, you can craft all the narratives you want. But the scoreboard is still the final editor. And if Shedeur gets his chance in London and doesn't deliver, the silence will come back. But this time, it won't be on his terms. But if he does rise to the occasion, if he comes out swinging, nails the plays, and proves that he's not just a viral moment, but a real contender, then the mime becomes mythology. A career footnote that aged into folklore. Either way, Shedeur Sanders made sure we'd all be watching. And that alone, that's half the battle in today's NFL. Nobody pulls a stunt like that unless they know exactly what they're doing. You think a third-string quarterback with legacy pressure, social media eyes, and NFL execs watching from the shadows is just going to freestyle a mime routine on national TV? Not a chance. That was a move designed for impact. And the impact? Immediate. The conversation flipped from does Shedeur belong in the NFL to wait. Is this kid playing for chess? That's the beauty and the danger of what Shedeur did. He made himself unforgettable in a position designed to be invisible. Most third stringers are ghosts. Background noise. Guys whose names you might not even recognize unless someone gets injured. But Shedeur just took that invisibility cloak, ripped it off, and set it on fire. And now he's got everyone's attention. Fans, haters, analysts, owners. The entire football industrial complex is locked in on what this kid does next. No pressure, right? Because here's the catch. When you go viral off the field, your leash on the field gets shorter. You better prove you're more than just a moment. One interception? People start asking if the mime was the highlight of your career. A single bad read? Suddenly that sideline silence feels like misplaced swagger. The clock is always ticking in this league, and Shedeur's set his timer with extra noise. But here's the twist that's making all of this way more interesting. He's not playing scared. He's not doing what most young athletes do when the heat turns up, issuing apologies, clarifying intentions, walking things back. Shedeur's leaning in, doubling down on confidence, owning the narrative without even breaking eye contact. And that right there? That's what's rattling the traditionalists. Because the NFL still worships a very specific brand of stoicism. Head down. Yes, sir. No theatrics. Speak with your performance, not your personality. It's an old-school mentality that doesn't know what to do with players who have media IQ and social game to match their athleticism. But Shedeur? He's not here to fit that mold. He's here to break it. And that's why Dan Orlovsky's take blew up the way it did. It wasn't just about disagreeing with a young player's antics. It was about being uncomfortable with how that player broke the script. A third-string QB, without a guaranteed path to the starting lineup, isn't supposed to be making statements. He's supposed to be humble, grateful, invisible. But Shedeur rejected invisibility. He dared to be seen, without even speaking. And that kind of audacity, whether you love it or hate it, demands a reaction. Now here we are, days away from the London game, and the stakes have never been higher for a guy in his position. It's not even about just playing well. He has to be better than expected, sharper, quieter in execution, louder in results. One moment of brilliance could silence every critic. One slip could validate every doubt. That's what makes this so intense. Shedeur has flipped the narrative, yes, but he's also raised the bar. He's no longer just a backup quarterback. He's a litmus test for where the league is headed. Are we embracing players who brand themselves like entertainers? Who challenge authority with subtlety? Who use silence like a scalpel? Or are we still clinging to the idea that success only comes to those who color inside the lines? Whatever happens in London, one thing's guaranteed. This is bigger than one game. It's bigger than one player. Shedeur has sparked a conversation about performance, perception, and the evolving definition of professionalism in sports. And whether he throws for 200 yards or doesn't take a single snap, the fact that we're still talking about a third-string quarterback's sideline mime proves one thing: he already won a round. Because relevance in the NFL isn't just about stats. It's about memory. And Shedeur has made himself unforgettable. So when the cameras roll in London and the plays start flying, we'll all be watching. Not just for the game, but for his game. For whether he can turn narrative into legacy, silence into strength, and a sideline moment into a career catalyst. Because love him or doubt him, you can't ignore him. And that's the kind of power most players never touch. Let us know in the comments. Was Shedeur's move a flex or a flop? And if you're here for the drama, the strategy, and the moments that turn athletes into icons, hit that subscribe. Because we're just getting started. And in this league, every gesture counts.